We're kind of continuing a video I did previously, Oklahoma State Route 82, not to be confused with US 82, Oklahoma Route 82. I did a video about it. It was like a 43-mile stretch in the southern part of Oklahoma, and then it stops, and then there's a gap, and then it starts again, and it goes another 100 miles, and we're starting on that northern segment here in Vian, Oklahoma. And I did kind of a deep dive into the history of Oklahoma 82 in that first video. So if you haven't seen it and want to wonder about the kind of the history of this road and how it, got started, and I kind of did that already in the first video. So in this video, we're gonna just focus on a lot of the communities that are along this road. There's some pretty scenic places, I think. Looking at the map, I've never been to very many of these places, or maybe just passed through quickly. So it should be fun. Vian is a good place to start. It's like 1,300 people. Vian is right on Interstate 40, so that's helped keep it relevant. Probably some of the towns we go through today won't be so fortunate because the interstate system bypassed roads like this, and most people travel on those interstates instead of down these two-lane highways, which have a lot of history and should be pretty interesting for people that like this channel to follow along. So it's about 100 miles. Doesn't go all the way to Kansas, but does end up near Route 66. So they might get to some familiar places by the end. So yeah, let's get started here in Vian and start heading north. There is Interstate 40. This is where State Route 82 on the north side here begins. Vian will be off to our left, and we're going under I-40 there. And there is the sign for 82 North. And now we'll be taking that road right into Vian. We're in Sequoyah County, and we're at the crossroads of US Route 64 and obviously Oklahoma State Route 82. Originating in the Cherokee Nation, Vian began as a trading post near Big and Little Vian Creeks. Vian is a form of a French word meaning meat, and French traders called Vian Creek Bayou Viandi, literally meaning meat bayou. The first postmaster wanted to name the town Round Mountain, but that was already taken. So the post office was established in 1886 as Vian, and by 1888, the arrival of the St. Louis Iron Mountain and Southern Railway boosted the economy, particularly cotton shipping. Education here included separate schools for Cherokee, white, and African American students, with a modern high school built in 1956. Through the years, agriculture and ranching remained vital, though the number of cotton gins fell. Tourism increased after the creation of Lake Tenkiller, which we'll see here in a little bit, and the Sequoyah National Wildlife Refuge, which is south of town, also contributes to the economy. You can see the population increased until 1920, then it went down a little bit, and then back up. It's been pretty steady for about the last 40 years. Our first little dot on the map is the unincorporated community of Box. There's not much here. There's a little RV spot on the right, and you'll see a cemetery coming up here shortly. But post office was open from 1911 to 1928. It was actually called Roy, R-O-Y, in 1911 before they changed it to Box. It was named after a local resident named Henry Box, and that's about all I know about the history of Box, but there is a pretty nice and large cemetery here. And here's another community called Blackgum, named after the Blackgum tree. Don't know too much about it, except for it did have a post office for 100 years, from 1895 to 1995. We're going to take a quick little detour off 82 here at that Chicken Creek sign. Take a few back roads over towards Tenkiller Lake. And this is a campground area. And there's obviously a pretty nice building there, old store of some kind. And this is where you would check in. There was no one there on this day. Must be kind of the off season. But yeah, there's Tenkiller Lake, popular recreation spot in the area. This is the unincorporated community of Cookson, and there's still a pretty significant population here because we're right there on the lake still. They have a post office, been open since 1895, and it was named after the first postmaster, John Cookson. Still some old buildings in the area, a couple churches, and the fire department. Here's another unincorporated community. This one's a little bit bigger, called Keys, Oklahoma, and we're in Cherokee County. And this one feels a little bit bigger and has a high school. So obviously it's a fairly significant community in the area, even though it's unincorporated. Before we get to the community of Park Hill, this is the Park Hill Cemetery, so we're like on the south side of the community. And the most interesting part, though, is across the street. If you take a little walk down this path, there's a historic cemetery called the Worcester Cemetery that was started in 1839. The last burial was 1905, and is named after a Reverend Samuel Worcester who did significant work with Native Americans, especially the Cherokee Nation. He won a pretty well-known court case in the Supreme Court fighting for Indian sovereignty, and then he moved here and started the Park Hill Mission right near this site. And so this is the historic cemetery in that area. There's some signage here that tells the history of Park Hill, of the mission, school, and the church. It has an explanation of who all the people buried in the cemetery are. And on the ground, this is a little more information about the Reverend and his family. This is the John Ross Museum. It was an old school built in 1913, turned into a museum. Unfortunately, it was closed on this day, but there's a cemetery here. John Ross was the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation for nearly 40 years and played a critical role during a turbulent era in Cherokee history. He was born in Alabama to a Scottish father and Cherokee mother and bridged Native and European American cultures. He staunchly opposed Indian removal and led resistance against the U.S. government's efforts, including the infamous Trail of Tears. Despite being forced west, he continued to lead the Cherokee Nation here in Indian Territory. He remains a symbol of Cherokee resilience and leadership. After visiting a couple cemeteries and historical places, this is the actual community of Park Hill. So these are buildings in the, I guess you'd call it the main street. There's not much left of the community, but you see a old school church. They do have a post office still. It's been here since 1892. And then over here is the Cherokee Heritage Center. And just to give you a little history about this whole town, Park Hill is a central place in Cherokee history and culture. It was established in the 1830s after the forced relocation of the Cherokee people along the Trail of Tears, so we kind of talked about that with John Ross. Park Hill became one of the first permanent settlements for the Cherokee Nation in Indian Territory. There was a post office from 1838 to 1847 before closing, and then they reopened in 1892 when the kind of the other part of the town was created. Park Hill was also the location of the Cherokee Female Seminary, established in 1851. It was one of the first institutions of higher education for Native American women. Throughout time, Park Hill remained a key site for Cherokee cultural preservation. And like I said, it's home to this Cherokee Heritage Center, which has a museum and a genealogy center. And as you can see, a bunch of interesting old buildings. There's a school there, and nothing was open, so just kind of like walking around, checking out the old buildings would be a fun place to stop when it's open. As we roll into Tahlequah, I usually don't do a huge deep dive into the larger towns or cities in these videos, but this one has a lot of significance, so I'll try to tell you a bit about its history as we drive through town and show you a few of the sites. Tahlequah is the county seat of Cherokee County. It was established as the Cherokee Nation capital in 1839 at the end of the Trail of Tears. Despite destruction during the Civil War, the town rebuilt. Major fire destroyed much of the downtown in 1895. The buildings destroyed were mostly wooden and replaced with brick structures. The arrival of the Ozark and Cherokee Central Railway in 1902 spurred growth in the town. With statehood in 1907, growth also was accelerated. The Cherokee Female Seminary that we talked about previously in Park Hill was rebuilt and evolved into Northeastern State University. With steady population growth and 9 registered historic sites, including the Cherokee National Capital, Tahlequah is still a vibrant cultural and historical center. In terms of how it got its name, there's a couple different stories. Many people believe the word Tahlequah and the word Tahlequah, spelled very similarly, are the same as Tahlequah, the Cherokee word for rice or grain. Others interpret a slightly different spelling of Tahlequah as plains. However, there's no word for plains in Cherokee. It's been a steady growing city/town since the beginning. And obviously as the county seat, it has a lot of significance there, but that along with the history of this area has helped the town grow to over 16,000 people today. A lot of interesting buildings to check out. Far too many for a video like this, but certainly a place you could come and spend an entire weekend exploring all the historical sites. Guess I'll just walk over here. If anybody's home or not. Doesn't appear anybody's home.
A horse is a horse, of course, and no one can talk to a horse, of course. That is, of course, unless the horse is the famous Mr. Ed. Go right to the source and ask the horse. He'll give you an answer that you'll endorse. He's always on a steady course. Talk to Mr. Ed. People yakety yak a streak and waste your time of day. But Mr. Ed will never speak unless he has something to say. To say. Something to say. A horse is a horse, of course, and this one will talk till his voice is hoarse. You never heard of a talking horse? Now listen to this. I am Mr. A fabulous horse, a magical horse, a most remarkable horse.